Okay, so thanks for spending your 12 o'clock hour with me. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. My name's DJ. If you didn't know, what we're doing today on the call is just basically sharing some best practices, not from my own experience, as I have zero experience. Everyone who's listening to this has done 1,000% more real estate than I have. I've never worked with a client. I have bought and sold my own things, and that is literally it. However, I have had the good fortune to have hired basically every broker here at KO Realty, which we have about 600. And also, I have now talked to just about 100 top 1% producers in Chicago on my podcast, which is called Keeping It Real. If you're not already a subscriber, I'd encourage you to check it out. It's keepingitrealpod.com. Also, you can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/keepingitrealpod. And if you're a Kale broker, which you probably are, you'll see I send emails every time we do a new episode. So we just launched one this morning with Bree Schmidt, who comes on every month to talk about investments. So we have two sort of sections to the podcast, or two different sort of categories of episodes. One is a top 1% producer, which we interview and basically ask them, how'd you grow your business? What advice do you have for brokers looking to do what you've done? What mistakes have you made? What mistakes do you see other brokers making? What are you doing today that might be different from when you started? And we so that's one type of episode we do. We also do regular episodes. And the regular episodes are, we have brokers that come on every month and give specific types of help and advice to our listeners. So for example, I mentioned Bree Schmidt. We did an episode this morning where she's an buy and hold investment expert. If you're a Bigger Pockets person, you know who Bree Schmidt is. She's a big deal. We're very honored to have her. She comes on once a month and says, here's what brokers need to know about investing. We have Carrie McCormick, who is a top 1% producer with At Properties, who comes on every month. She's actually number 19 in the last 12 months out of 40,000 realtors, top production. And she comes on and says, here's what brokers need to know about what's going on with the Chicago market. We have Joel Schaub from Guaranteed Rate, who says, here's what brokers need to know about lending. And we have Ryan DiApril, who comes on every month and says, I'm going to coach every one of your listeners for the next hour. So we do have some regular episodes. Sorry for the long preamble, but I really want to make the pitch that if you're not listening to the show, I think we have something for every broker. And I am in the process, just to add another regular episode with Zillow, who, as you probably know, if you're a Kale broker, they provide us with live transfer leads. And obviously, brokers know that Zillow sells leads too. And so the idea is we're negotiating with them right now to hopefully get them on a monthly episode to talk about how to work internet leads. Because, of course, those are very different from referrals and your existing sphere of influence. Okay, so that's enough listening to me about my podcast. But please subscribe. It's on iTunes, Google Play, anywhere podcasts are served, because the intention of it is to get in touch and give you access to the actual strategies that these top 1%ers, again, there's 40,000, well, just under 40,000 realtors, 39,000. And so we only talk to the top 400. And it's really a lot of fun, and they are super generous. And if you went back and listened to any of the episodes, there isn't one where you wouldn't get one really good idea. I don't believe there's any secrets in this industry, and it certainly doesn't appear that there are. And so my intention today is not to continue talking about my podcast, but to share with you some of the wisdom that these top 1% producers have shared with me and our listeners. So as I said at the beginning, I am not a producing broker. So I am only going to relay information that has been provided to me by these top producers, and we are hopefully I can provide some guidance here. So what I basically want to do, instead of just lecturing you, which I'm sure would be really super boring, I want to give you guys some real value. So a couple of you had written in and said your biggest challenge with your traditional realtor business, what I mean by that is going out and finding buyers and sellers, is generating leads. And I suspect that's a lot of brokers' number one concern, right? It's certainly the biggest concern in my business, which is recruiting realtors. And so I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about some best practices around lead generation. And I want to start by and I, I have like the world's worst memory, so I can't recall exactly who said these things to me, but I want to give you some of the advice that's been passed along through the different people we've interviewed for the show. Number one, we just had somebody on like within the last month who said if you're not spending 50% of your time looking for clients, and clients meaning people that actually need to buy or sell or rent, then you're probably not spending enough time doing that, right? At the end of the day, everything comes from prospecting. So I want to talk a lot about lead generation because that was the number one question people have written in. So let's get really, really granular with lead gen. The first thing I want to talk about is your existing sphere of influence, because I think let's start there. Before we talk about going out and meeting new people, let's talk about who you already know. And it turns out, which I didn't know this till just recently, that out of the 100 people that you are closest to, and everybody knows, actually they say everyone knows like 250 people, but if you just look at the top 100 closest people to you in your life, the statistics say that 32 to 64 transactions will happen in the next 12 months from that existing 100 people that you already know. They say basically 32 people out of the 100 will do at least one sales transaction. I don't know if that includes rentals. I think it's just sales. But anyway, let's just throw rentals in too. So out of the 100 people, 32 of them are going to do something and have some sort of real estate transaction. And then they also say it could actually be up to 64 because those people tend to do two transactions, right? The sell and then the buy, right? That's pretty common. So let's just be really conservative and say it's 32. So my first question to anyone listening who's looking to generate more leads, it's let's forget about meeting new people at the moment. What are we doing to nurture your existing 100 people in your sphere of influence? And I interviewed a guy he's with Keller Williams, and unfortunately his episode got deleted before it ever made it to air, so we're going to re-record it. But his name's Stephen Haddad now. He's pretty popular. He's a very nice guy, and he had a really interesting thought because I had asked him, how did you get started and what did you do in your first year? Like, what did you do your first day? Because he particularly did not have a real estate background when he started. He's a top 1% producer. And he said, well, I only knew about 100 people, and I assumed, and he had two assumptions, and I think they're both really good assumptions. The first being that these 100 people are the most likely to use my services. But the other assumption he made is nobody's going to remember that I'm a realtor because he was brand new. And why would they know that he's a realtor? So I'm going to give you a really specific example, and I'm not suggesting everyone should do this, but it is certainly not the world's worst idea to think this way. So here's what he did. And it's a pretty extreme strategy, but it worked. And I'm going to give you the numbers of exactly how it worked. So he thought, and he's a really nice guy. And he goes, and I'm going to give you his whole thought process because it's so interesting. Because I think realtors tend to treat their sphere of influence, their contact list, like prospects. And I think that is the world's worst idea, right? Your friends do not want you to try to, to sell them, right? They're going to use you if they remember you're a realtor, but they don't want to be pressured. I'm speaking generally. I'm sure maybe some are okay with you pushing them. I just personally don't like to be pushed myself. I certainly wouldn't want to push my friends to use me as a realtor, but I would want them to not forget that I'm a realtor. So Stephen said he had this real dilemma. He's like, how do I stay in touch with my 100 closest people without annoying them? Which is a really awesome question to ask. And he said, well, he thought about, well, okay, what are the different ways to stay in touch with your sphere of influence? Well, you could call them. Okay, that's maybe not the worst idea. But then what do you say, right? These are your friends. These are people you know. I'm not saying you shouldn't call them, but he was sort of like, well, I don't know what to say. So he thought, I don't really want to do that very often because I'm calling every month going, hey, do you need help buying or selling a home? That's going to get annoying. It's going to maybe make them uncomfortable. And also, maybe not exactly the most, I don't know, maybe just not didn't fit his personality. By the way, I'm not saying other people shouldn't do this. I'm just saying, I just realized I'm only coming through the left channel, so I'm going to change that. So I apologize, guys. If I can't change that, I'll fix it later. But I think unfortunately are coming through just one channel. Okay, so sorry for that. So anyway, so Stephen said, okay, I don't want to make calls every month. What am I going to say? Then he thought, well, what about emails? And he goes, I don't really want to email my client list or my sphere of influence every month for the same reason. It's annoying. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to read your newsletter, things like that, right? And he thought, it's kind of impersonal, not really. And you're just kind of spamming your contact list. And again, I'm giving you his thoughts, not necessarily mine, but I would mostly agree with that. Then he thought, okay, what about Facebook, right? And Instagram, so, Twitter, etc. And he said, I don't want to be the realtor on there saying, hey, if anyone needs help. He just didn't want to consistently do that. So he was looking for a way to consistently remind his contact list, that he was a realtor in a non-annoying fashion, which is, again, a really difficult thing, I think, to figure out. And what he did is he figured out that postcards were probably the best way to do this. It's interesting. I'd never heard of anyone that's done it this way. Now, we all know about brokers sending out postcards. At the building I live in River North, I get one every month from some realtor and showing, hey, here's what I've listed, here's what I've sold. It's usually co-opted by a lender, and I get one postcard from whoever, and I never get another postcard. And I throw it away, 2 seconds later, and I'm always amazed, why did somebody spend money on this? Does this ever work? So what Stephen thought is, he goes, if I'm going to send out postcards to my people who already know me, I better do it pretty consistently. So what he did is he sent out a postcard to his 100 contacts every single Friday for 50 weeks or 52 weeks. Now that's pretty extreme, but it's actually a really smart idea, because nobody gets annoyed at a postcard, and he made them funny. And he didn't, just put the same message on every week about, hey, I need your business, or I want your business. So he would write something cute. And we figured out that the total cost for that was I think it was $88 a month. So all he had to do every week was just, create the front and back of a card, and he used some service to send it out. So anyway, and he said it was really funny because people would really think it was just crazy that he was doing this every single week. But he goes, they're not going to forget that I'm a realtor, which pretty smart thought. And nobody gets annoyed at a postcard. And I laughed when he told me, and I said, well, don't you know they just threw them away? And he goes, of course they did. He goes, I didn't care. I wanted them to throw them. Of course they're going to throw them away. But for 2 seconds, they're going to remember I'm a realtor. And then they're going to throw it away. And I thought that's pretty smart. So I said, okay, what was the result, right? So it's a good idea in theory, but what actually happened? So he said, well, after it took about 2 years. Now, he only did this for a year. He only sent out postcards for 50 or 52 weeks. And he said that was enough. I figured I was pushing my luck. I didn't really want to annoy anybody. And then he told me that out of those 100, I believe it was 60 of those people used him within the next 2 years. 60 out of 100. So let's go all the way. Now, by the way, would I spend $100 a month to get 60 sales in 2 years? Yeah, I would, right? So that's one way. That's not the only way, of course. But the question is, and the point I'm trying to make is, what are you doing to remind the people closest to you that you are a realtor? If it's true that 100 people are going to do between 30 and 60 transactions a year, how many of those are you capturing, and how many are going to someone else? And if they're going to someone else, is it because their brother-in-law or their sister is a realtor, which not much you can do about that? Or is it because they just forgot you're a realtor, which could be the case, and probably is the case. But the point is, if you're not already getting 30 to 60 sales a year, or rentals or whatever, out of your existing sphere of influence, then start to think about, how do I stay in touch? Now, postcards aren't the only way, and maybe that's not even the best way for you, because, I don't know, maybe that's not your personality. But there's got to be something that you can do on a consistent basis to keep your name in front of those people. I personally, we've talked about this. So I do a monthly episode with Ryan April, I mentioned, where we talk about coaching, and we've gotten into this topic in great details. Okay, because Ryan will say you need to call people in your contact list every single day, and that's his philosophy. And I say, well, that's great, Ryan. What do you say? He goes, if you don't have a list of things about each person to talk about, then you need to go through your contact list and make those lists. If somebody has children, well, maybe once they go to school in the fall, time to call and say, hey, how is so-and-so's, first grade experience? Or what's it like now that you have more free time because the kids are at school? Or, hey, the holidays are coming up. What are you guys up to? I'll tell you, just to divert for a second, to digress, Joel Schaub calls me every so often. He's the guy on our podcast I mentioned earlier from Guaranteed Rate. And he literally just goes, hey, man, I haven't talked to you in a really long time. What's going on in your life? What are you up to? And Joel and I are friends. We're not that close of friends. We don't really hang out socially, although we should and we will. But he just calls me. He goes, he never has asked for business. I have sent him 3 or 4 clients in the last year because I know he's amazing. But he literally just calls me once a month and goes, what's going on with you? What are you up to? And he legitimately cares. It's a 5-minute call. He goes, great, just checking in. It makes me feel sort of bad because I should do that to him because I actually really like him. But the point is that's what Joel does. Is that a great approach? Yep. I've never had a lender call me once a month and go, what's going on with you? How are you doing? Right? And Joel's that kind of guy where he's legitimately, genuinely wants to do that. When he comes on our show, he comes on once a month, talks about rates. He goes, DJ, I do not want to promote Guaranteed Rate. I only want to add value. I want to just give back to the community and your listeners. And as a result, Joel gets a ton of business, right? So think about ways you can provide value to your contact list. And that doesn't necessarily mean sending them just a newsletter or saying, hey, I saw this article. By the way, that's another great reason, right? I saw this article. Here's a perfect example. So we know that mortgage rates, and I don't know where they are like today, but in the last month, they've been at the lowest in like over a year, right? The rates. How many of you called every single person in your your contact list and said, I was just thinking about, these would be homeowners, or maybe not, maybe renters. You could call anyone and say, but let's just say it was a homeowner. I was thinking about you. I don't know if you are aware, but mortgage rates are at their lowest. And I don't know if it makes sense for you to refinance or not, but I just thought I'd let you know that I know a lot of people are doing that right now. And if you should call your lender and just, maybe they can run some numbers for you. And if you don't have a lender, I can refer someone to you. How valuable is that? When I've owned places, lenders have never, ever called me to tell me things like that, right? They never call, probably because I don't know if they want you to refinance or not. But the point is that's adding value. Calling somebody and saying, hey, it's August. Are your kids in school? How are they doing? Right? That's value, right? So think about ways to deepen the relationship, right? So anything that you can do to stay in touch with your existing list, again, remembering that what we're trying to do is build intimacy, trust, and value. And ultimately what we're going to receive by that is the broker hopefully choosing you over XYZ realtor, and 99% of realtors do not do this, right? We know that. I interviewed, I'm going to digress again for a second because I have another really good idea. This has to do with doing open houses. Okay. So totally separate topic. I apologize for the sharp left turn here, but I think this goes to a very similar place. Let's say you're hosting an open house. Okay. And let's just say it's even for one of your own listings. Of course you can do open houses for other people's listings too, but let's say it's for your listing. I talked to Nico Apostle, and if you know Nico, he's at Keller Williams. He was at Coldwell Banker forever. He's a complete nicest guy you've ever met. Top 1% producer, very, very well known and respected in the broker community here. And he was telling me, and it's a great episode if you go back and listen to it. He said I think he was 23 when he got his license, and he was laughing when we were talking about it. He says, I said, how'd you get started? He goes, DJ, nobody's going to give me their home to sell at 23. He goes, I didn't know what I was doing. People knew I didn't know what I was doing, and I had no business, and none of my friends were buying or selling homes. So what he did is he went around to, at the time he was a Coldwell Banker, all the different Coldwell Banker agents, because he's a Lincoln Park guy. He said, hey, if anyone has a Lincoln Park listing, I will do an open house for you anytime, day or night. So every weekend he had 2 or 3 open houses planned. And then he goes, I said, that's great, but did anyone ever show up? And he goes, I assume they wouldn't, because why would they? Why would people just show up to my open house? So what he did is he got there an hour early. He walked around, and Nico is like the nicest guy ever, right? So he walked around and knocked on the doors of everyone in the neighborhood very politely, very non-aggressively, and said, hey, I didn't mean to bother you. Just wanted to let you know that I'm we're going to be doing an open house down the street. If you're in any way interested, feel free to swing on by. And I said, well, that's interesting. And I go, I said, how did that work? He goes, well, the thing the reason he did it, he goes, neighbors are nosy. They want to see what somebody else's home looks like. And I was like, that is brilliant. And I said, I have interviewed a lot of people, top 1%ers, and no one's ever mentioned that they do that. And he goes, that's the secret of his early success, was not just doing an open house, but literally very politely walking around, knocking on doors, and, very apologetically saying, hey, just wanted to let you know if you're interested in checking out this place, come on by. Another good idea. Sorry, that was a little bit of a shift from us talking about your existing sphere of influence. But again, back to your sphere of influence. So what are you doing to stay in touch? And look, if all you're doing is sending a newsletter once a month, I know I kind of, was a bit negative towards newsletters. That's better than doing nothing. If all you're doing is making a phone call every quarter, checking in on them, seeing what their family's up to, what's going on in their life. Oh, by the way, what do you say when you call these people? Because I think phone calls are great. So I talked about Joel, who calls me and just goes, man, what's going on with you? But I mean, Joel and I kind of know each other pretty well. You might not have that relationship with all of your contact list. So, and this is a Ryan DeApril idea, and I was like, couldn't believe I had not thought of it. It's so simple and smart. He goes, well, you should be Facebook friends or Instagram friends or Twitter friends or LinkedIn friends with everyone who you're closest to. You go through and look to see what's going on in their lives. Pull up their page, pull up their LinkedIn, see if anything, Instagram, see what vacations they've been on, see what's going on with their family, see what they've been eating, and what they've been talking about on social media, and say, hey, I was just checking out, I saw this picture of you guys in Bermuda, and that sounds awesome. Would you recommend going there? Tell me about it. How was it? So if you're at a loss for what to say when you contact these people, and by the way, this doesn't have to be a phone call, right? So if you see something on Facebook, you could shoot them a message, right? Or reply directly to, the actual post itself. I think I'd pick up the phone and call just because no one does that. And by the way, it's okay to get someone's voicemail. And the thing, by the way, there's a really cool tool out there called Slide Dial. It's really meant to be used in bulk. What it does is it instantly deposits your message into their voicemail. So if you're sort of like, I don't really want to call, but I want them to get the message, we use it here whenever we have to send voicemails to 600 brokers. We obviously don't do that one by one. We wouldn't be able to. So we just record a blanket message, which you probably wouldn't want to do. Yours would want to be personalized. But guys, it's 10 cents a call. So even if you record it, it's more work to do it this way. But if you're like, I really don't want to call that person, but I want them to think that I called them, or I want them to at least hear the message I want to send them, you could spend 10 cents, record a voicemail. It takes 2 seconds, and then it'll just automatically deposit it in their voicemail. So anyway, I'm getting kind of in the weeds here, but wanted to give you guys some ideas. Just always remember that, because there's a million ways to find people outside of your sphere of influence. We live in a city where there's 2.7 million people in the city, right? And there's 9.8? I think it's 9.8 million people in the whole greater Chicago area, including all the way down to Joliet. So we know that there's plenty of people to go out and meet. That's never a problem. You can meet people all day long, and you probably should be doing that too. But if you're not, but those are people who are least likely to work with you, quite frankly, right? If we have this funnel of leads, the people that you already know who like and trust you, those are the people most likely to use you. So let's not forget to nurture them, and also operate out of the assumption that they're just going to forget that that's what you do. They got their own lives. They're not going to remember anything about you unless you consistently remind them. And I used to work right out of college. I worked for Anheuser-Busch, which probably still is the largest beer manufacturer in the country. Budweiser reigns supreme in essentially every city except for 2, Milwaukee and Chicago. But everywhere else, the market share is just outstanding. Well, what are they constantly doing? Same thing with Coke. Why is Coke beating Pepsi? Why is Coke always beat Pepsi? Well, their messaging is more consistent, and they have larger dollars to throw behind it. So the messaging is just constant. Drink Coke, drink Budweiser, right? Is Budweiser a superior product? Is Coke a superior product? Maybe, probably not, but certainly people learn by repetition. So If every single day you just thought about, hey, I've got 100 people in my database, let's divide up the month by, let's say how many business days are there in a month? 20? So let's just say there's 20. So every day I have to talk to 5 people, whether it's I'm going to call them, look them up on Facebook first, see what they're up to, and say, hey, and by the way, if you've never called somebody before and you're like a little scared to call them, and you know, like I said, you could slide dial, go right to their voicemail, or you could literally just go, hey, I have not done a great job of staying in touch with you, and I want to change that. And I'm calling you because I was just thinking about you, and hey, just wanted to check in. By the way, I know you're a homeowner, and I was just reading this article, and I thought, well, this might apply to you, and maybe it's a good time to refinance. If you need help, finding a lender, I've got someone, or just call the person you're working with. But I don't know, just thinking about you. That's value. Or you could call and say, oh my gosh, I just met this amazing accountant, and I don't know if you're using an accountant, but if you need somebody, I've got the person. Or a financial advisor, or I don't know, whatever else, right? Like any service that you think could be helpful. Here's another reason to call somebody: when somebody buys their first home. Here's another great example. So these are already your clients at this point, right? So how do you stay in touch with your existing clients, which we'll still put in that sphere of influence? Or just even forgetting about that. If you know somebody just bought their home and maybe they didn't even use you, and it's their first home. I know when I bought my first home, I was like, I don't know what to do now. And I had my home was like a renovation thing. So I didn't know how often was I supposed to change the filters? How often was I supposed to get certain things serviced? I had zero idea. And I still kind of have zero idea. I don't really understand that stuff at all. But a good realtor does, right? So what you could do is say, hey, I know you just bought your first house. I just read this great article on what you need to do in your first year, or just some things to put in your calendar about when to change various things, get certain things cleaned. That's a reason to call somebody, right? So again, the steps, I think, if you were to think about how to stay in touch with your existing sphere of influence, is you really got to write a little biography of each person, right? You got to know, where they're working. You got to know about their family. You should absolutely know everybody's birthday. I mean, that is a no-brainer. How many people how many of your best friends call you on your birthday, right? Probably less than you'd like. I always get a little bummed out on my birthday. I'm like, no one called. Now I might get a few text messages. And by the way, you can text message too. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm saying, if you're not reaching out to everybody on your contact list, whether it's a phone call or email, I wouldn't do email, phone call or text on their birthday. I mean, it's the easiest reason to call somebody. Or if they're Jewish, hey, I know it's day 1 of Hanukkah. I hope you're having a great Hanukkah, right? Christmas, etc., birthdays, 4th of July, whatever it is. Nobody does that anymore. Also, here's another thing you can do. I just wrote an article, or did I? Yeah, I just wrote an article about the power of personal notes. So you should be writing personal notes at least once a year. I would think more like 3 times a year. I would think every 4 months, write a little personal note to everybody in your contact list. By the way, so if you have to talk to 5 a day, we just talked about, hey, I got 100 people in my database. I'm going to talk to them every single month in some capacity. That doesn't mean you make 12 phone calls, right? That's probably too many. It doesn't mean you write 12 personal notes over the year. That's probably too many, but you break it up. So this month I'm writing, Tim a personal note. Next month I'm going to call him because it's his birthday. In June, I'm going to call him because his kids are out of school and I want to see how that's going, et cetera. There's a million reasons. But if you create a little strategy and you just know every single month, Tim is going to get something from me. And maybe 1 month it's a newsletter. Maybe 1 month it's just a little Facebook message. Hey man, hope you're doing well. It doesn't have to be this super intimate conversation. Again, we're going back to capturing the 32 to 64 transactions that people in your life are already doing. I promise you, if every single month you're reaching out in a authentic way to your contact list, you will absolutely get more transactions. It's look, there's a reason why, and I mean, we do it from a very genuine place, but it's not like just by accident. We send out birthday cards to every one of our brokers. We handwrite them, right? It's a huge hassle for us to do that. We all sign it. Now, again, we're not doing this as a tactic, but does it make our brokers feel appreciated? I hope so. They certainly report that it does. And we're also so honored that they're with us. I mean, it's not just, this thing we do to like trick them into thinking we care. We actually care. We also send them an anniversary card on their employment date. I mean, I'll bet you 99% of firms don't do either of those two things. I don't know, maybe they do, but they should, right? So those are really easy things. They take a little bit of work, but, the idea is there's always, if you structure your communication strategy, I promise you, even if you're the world's worst realtor, which obviously nobody aspires to be, the people in your contact list probably won't know how good or bad you are. They will know how much that you care about them, right? So that's just kind of the big message. And I apologize. I know I've been going on and on and on and on, but hopefully this has been helpful. So let's stop. Hard stop on this lead question. And normally we'll figure out a way in the future where this can be more of a conversation, but that's that one. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Somebody else asked about cost-effective lead generation. I'm not totally sure I understand that, but I would say we just talked about how to talk to your existing sphere of influence. How do you meet people outside? Well, there's a million ways to do that, right? Cost-effective lead generation is, to me, most lead gen should be zero cost unless you're purchasing leads from Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com, places like that, which are happy to sell you leads. And if you close 5% of them, you're a superstar, and it certainly pays for itself. But how about Brian Buffini, who, if you're not familiar with, you should be, because he's probably the best trainer there is, or certainly one of them. His whole thing is the way that you win the day is you meet 2 to 5 people every single day. And that's if you're full-time. If you're part-time, let's just say it's 1 to 2 people a day. And by the way, how easy is that to do? It is not easy to meet 2 to 5 people a day. It sounds easy. It's just like it sounds easy to do 30 push-ups when I wake up in the morning before I hit the shower. I don't do that, but would it be helpful if I did? Like, absolutely. So it's not easy to get out and meet people every day. So I'm not going to pretend that like you just go out and meet people. It's hard, but it's pretty worthwhile, right? Because you want to consistently add your database. So I'm going to give you another anecdote. So who was it that told me this? Tommy Choi and Josh Weinberg. You guys probably know them, the Weinberg-Choi residential team. They're out of Keller Williams. They are some of the biggest producers and some of the most respected and just the nicest guys on the planet. So Josh, and by the way, Tommy is the car president currently. But Josh said, I asked him, I said, what are your business goals? Like, what are your production goals? And he was like, gosh, I've never thought of that. This is a top 1% producer who's literally in he and Tommy are in the top 50 of realtors in all of Chicago. He was like, gosh, we've never even thought of that. And I said, well, what do you mean? How do you not think of it? And he goes, we figured out that there's only one thing we have to do every single day. And I think they're like 10 or 11 years in, maybe even more. And by the way, nicest guys in the world. If you shoot them an email and ask them, they will talk to you. That's how nice they are. And they are too busy to even do an interview with me, but they did it. So Josh said, now he puts this on Tommy, so this is like Tommy's job. He says, if Tommy meets one new person every single day, now this is, by the way, they're like 10 or 11 years in. So I want to really hammer that point. These guys work by referral, right? He's like, if Tommy meets one new person every single day, we will hit whatever financial goals we've set. So that we don't even set them. All we do is Tommy meets one person a day. So think about that. Let's just say he does it 5 days a week. So that's 5 people. That's 20 people a month. Is that right? 5? Yeah. So 240 people a year, something like that. He adds 240 people to his database, and then they have a whole communication strategy and whatever. So that is like their cornerstone behavior. So if you can meet one person a day, 240 people a year, you'll have more leads than you know what to do with, even if you have a really awful communication strategy and you don't stay in touch. Of course, you should do that too. So what's the way to actually get out and meet people? I can't really tell you that because, if you're standing in line at the grocery store, you could turn to the person behind you. That counts, right? I don't know if that's the best way. You guys are all adults. We all know how we can get out and meet people. I would encourage you to get involved with something you're passionate about. So, for example, I am very passionate about Misericordia, and I spend every other week, I spend several hours every other Tuesday at Misericordia giving some of my time. It's very important to me, and I don't do it for any, I've never once recruited a realtor to come work here from there, but it's very important to me. However, there are lots and lots of people who I come in contact with that if I was a realtor, who ask me what I do, and I say I'm in marketing and I don't really get into the real estate thing, because if they say they need help, I can't really help them because I don't do that. But my point is I'm really passionate. I love doing it. And as a result, people do ask me what I do. So if you have a charity or foundation or just some way of giving back to the community, that is another great idea. Let me give you one really specific idea of giving back. So a woman I interviewed on the show, Grace Goro-Cage, she's an @Properties broker. Her partner is Julia Brenner. She's also obviously @Properties. They're like actually Julia is Julia and Grace are both on the board for the YPN. They're both very sweet, nice women. And so I live really close to Paws downtown, and they invited me, just because we're friends, to come to an event last summer where they invited everyone in their contact list to to come and spend a couple hours at Paws, helping with the staff at Paws. We sat and made t-shirts. We took t-shirts and we made them into little chew toys for dogs. We played with the dogs. We got a tour of the facility, and the Paws facility is awesome if you've never seen it, down on LaSalle. But anyway, and I was thinking about, why is this such a great idea? Like, why is this so much fun? And by the way, I'm not one of Grace or Julia's clients, right? I'm never going to use them for a real estate transaction. Why did I spend a couple hours out of my Sunday to do that? Well, because everybody wants to be known. Everybody wants to feel good about their own behavior, right? And we're all pretty selfish individuals, right? That's just the nature of how we're wired. But everyone wants to, you talk to, if you meet somebody who volunteers, or whenever somebody asks me about what I volunteer in, they'll always go, God, I wish I did more of that. And okay, fine, not everyone has to do that, but most people want to do that. They just haven't set it up in their lives. So what you can do, and what Julia and Grace did, is they set up basically a structure where people could come for a couple of hours and donate some time and feel good about themselves because they're helping. And guess what that does to Julia and Grace? That makes them look pretty good too. So we talk about cost-effective lead gen. Now this is your sphere of influence. And they did a bring a friend thing. I didn't bring a friend, but they were like, bring a friend. So I don't know what it cost them, if it cost them anything at all. I know they provided pizza, so I don't know, maybe it's $40. And I'm sure maybe they had to rent the room at Paws, but probably not, because you were donating time and we all volunteered there. But the point is we all walked away from there feeling good about what we did as individuals. And, Grace and Julia obviously get a lot of the props for setting the whole thing up. So that's another option, right? In fact, I should do that here at Kale. I should tell our brokers, like, hey, let's go, do some sort of volunteer thing and, that kind of thing. So anyway, I don't follow a lot of my own advice either. So, but I wanted to give you guys a couple of, so that's a good cost-effective lead gen. Do a volunteer thing. Tell your clients to bring a friend. And the last thing was time and organization. And I am probably the worst person to ask about that, but I do have a plug for someone. If you're willing to spend, I think it's $100. This made all the difference for me because I've read a lot of books on organization. I have a system now that I utilize, which is loosely based off of Getting Things Done by David Allen, which probably a lot of people on this call know. But that's a difficult read and it's a hard system to implement. But I found a guy who sort of distilled the best parts of it into a really workable system, which is named Tiago Forte. So if you just search for Tiago, it's Tiago. And you know what? You don't have to search for that. Just search for how to getting things done like a boss, I think is what it's called. Or Tiago Getting Things Done Like a Boss. I think it's $100. It might have only been 50, whatever it was. And it's all these videos. And he literally is like, here's how you organize your day. And it's not real estate related. It's just, figuring out projects, figuring out what comes first, systems to use. Like I use Todoist, along with some paper and pen systems. But figuring out every day, I think the most important thing is figuring out what are my cornerstone activities. So Brian Buffini would say you have to meet 2 to 5 people a day. That is how you win the day. Now, is that how you spend your whole day? No. Brian Buffini would say, and does say, no, you only spend about an hour a day doing that. What do you do the other 7 hours? Well, maybe 6 of those 7 hours you're working with your existing clients, right? Customer service, right? So anything that's not lead gen, that you already have a client or a customer or a lead itself, that is customer service. So probably the bulk of your day is not going out and meeting people. But although, like I said, that one gentleman said you should spend 50% of your day meeting people. I don't know what that number is for you, but I promise you if you can add 1 to 2 people to your database a day. And by the way, let me just give you one little piece of advice on that. When you meet a stranger, giving them your card, assume it's going to get thrown away, not because they don't like you, just because people throw away. I throw away cards when people give them to me. It's not because I'm trying to be rude. I don't know what to do with it. Like I throw it in a drawer and then never see it again. So what I would do, and I heard this 20 years ago when I started in financial services, is they said the only reason to hand out a business card is to get one back. Most people don't walk around with business cards, right? So what I would do when you meet a stranger who doesn't know you, give them your card and then almost like apologetically go, hey, look, if you're like me, I don't keep anyone's card, but here's my card if you do keep it. But I'll tell you what, let me make this easier for you. What's your email address? And I'll just shoot you a quick email and let you know what I do. If you ever need my services, you at least have it. So that's a little tip. Give them your card, but really get the email. And then ideally, become their friend on Facebook, maybe even get their home address at some point, write them a personal note, yada, yada. You know how to do that. Okay, and time and organization. So yeah, cornerstone activities. What do you need to do every day? So for me, I'll give you a really silly example, but it's really helped me in my life. So how long have I been here? 10 years? So 10 years ago, I did not bring my lunch to work. And here's what happened. At 12 o'clock every day, I started going, I wonder what I'm going to eat today. And typically I didn't choose well because, I just, whatever, I hadn't put any thought into it. I was stressed. I had stuff going on. I didn't have time to really go somewhere and get anything healthy. And I just ate not the best options. So now I make my lunch I make it once a week. I batch cook and whatever. But the point is I set up all my lunches ahead of time and then just grab one to go. And why do I do that? I guess technically it saves me money, but that's really doesn't factor in. I guess it's a nice side benefit, but the reason I do it is I never have to think about it. And I know I'm going to eat healthy, or rather I'm less likely to eat poorly. So my point is that's a cornerstone activity for me, because for me, health is really important. If I don't have good energy, I'm not going to be very productive. Now, there's things I'm not doing, right? So every day I should wake up, and a cornerstone activity should be knock out some push-ups or, hit the gym in some capacity, right? And there's always improvements we can make. But think about some of those cornerstone activities for your business. One of those being meet 1 person a day. Another one being reach out to 5 people in your contact list in some capacity that you already know. Guys, if you just do those 2 things, if you meet 1 or 2 people a day and talk to 5 people in your database, I don't think you're going to need much. I think all of the leads are going to be showered upon you. It might take a year or 2. By the way, when we started the podcast, we have no marketing budget. We've not spent $1 on marketing. And I don't in any way think I'm so amazing as a podcast host that thousands and thousands of people are going to listen. Who am I? I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not a producing realtor. But I think this would be really helpful if we talk to top producing realtors. But how do we get the word out there? Well, I knew I didn't really have a ton of control over that because I had no marketing budget. I couldn't put a billboard out or, we send out emails and things, but other than that, there's no money ever spent. And honestly, if there was another show that was very similar to mine and it was better, they would probably get all my traffic. It's not that amazing. It's good, I think, but the reason why we have all these listeners is because I consistently do it. Right? I do it every single week. There's been a few times where it's been a week or 2 where I just got too busy, but then I come back the next time and I do 2 or 3 episodes that week. And you just and I had to really think about whether to do it because I knew if I started and stopped it, it wasn't going to build momentum, right? People want consistency and they want value. And the show is all about value. So I knew I needed to devote the time, and it is a tremendous amount of work, but it's worth it. Because we get fan mail almost every day in some capacity that say, oh my God, that was so helpful. And, I hope down the road that, and we're almost 100 episodes in, that ultimately, will generate more brokers will come to KL Realty as a result. We haven't seen a huge spike yet, but we have thousands and thousands of people who listen every episode. So that's cool. It provides value, and, people know it. People know it. And so it's very exciting, but it is a tremendous amount of work for free. So we know this business, real estate, is all about working for free. 99% of it is working for no money. And so if you can just figure out consistent ways to provide value for free, I promise you it's going to come back to you, because we know that the statistics, almost everybody who buys a home uses a realtor. Almost everyone that sells a home uses a realtor. I thought 10 years ago that the for sale by owner market was going to take over. And let me tell you this, I have a friend who is the CFO of Bankrate.com. That is a very big company. If Bankrate's ever like huge, it's like them and NerdWallet are like the two biggest personal finance websites. He's also on the board for Guitar Center. This is like a big deal guy, and it's actually my friend's husband. And we were out I got to hang out with him a few years ago. And again, this is the CFO of a huge company. He goes, how are realtors still relevant anymore? He's like, how is the for sale by owner market not completely taken over? And I was like, I would be shocked as well, not because I don't see the value in realtors. I just assumed the public would be sold that they could do it all themselves. And what we've learned is that for sale by owner listings are down to their lowest amount in like 10 years. So why is that? Why does somebody not just spend $500, put it on the MLS through a flat fee, and do everything themselves? Well, because we know it doesn't really work that well, right? They need you. So the public still sees huge value in working with realtors, right? We know that's not changing, or hopefully will never change, right? Like, we need you guys, you need your business, we need you. But isn't that amazing that even though a seller can just spend $500 versus paying you 2.5%, right? And then another 2.5% to the other side, that they're still willing to do that because of what you bring to the table. Because putting it on the MLS, they can do that for $500. That is not your value, right? So the point is what you provide is so insanely valuable. They're going to use somebody. We know that 90-something% of all homes sold in Chicago sell through the MLS. They sell through realtors. So the for sale by owner market is so tiny and almost inconsequential that I don't think it's all that relevant at all. And personally, would I waste time calling expireds? Well, expireds maybe. For sale by owner, I don't know. Those seem like tough calls to me. I would go, well, I already know there's going to be 30 to 60 transactions in my existing friends every single year. Okay. So, guys, I think, what other questions? Are there any other questions? You can just type them in. I've muted everyone. Is there any other questions? Let's see. Jeff had a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, guys, I'm going to read through these questions real quick. So Jeff's asking, engaging new clients in a niche market. He works with buying to renovate. Good question, Jeff. I don't have a great answer for you.